Hello, this is Erin Bassett, teacher and tech explorer, here to share with you a few of the tools that make my life a little bit easier. The first thing I want to introduce you to, of course, is my favorite tool in Google Drive, and that is the Google Doc feature. If I want to create a new document, I just go into my Google Drive and click New Google Doc, and it opens up a brand new document just like we would in Microsoft Word or any other word processing software. What I'd like to do here is just type a little bit of sample text and show you we have the same features that we would in Microsoft Word. We can adjust our font sizes, go ahead and bold and italics, anything like that. But the great thing about Google Docs is it's more than just my paper. It's something that I can share with my colleagues and share with my students. One of my favorite features here is the comment feature. If I see something that I would like to comment on, I don't have to run and get a post-it note and then try to connect to someone. I could actually type my ideas just right here, and that is creating a little note on the document. This document can also be shared. I can take this information and using the sharing feature, I can go ahead and share this sample document with anyone that I have their email address. We can enter their email addresses and give them the opportunity to edit. They could just simply be allowed to comment, or perhaps you only want them to see the document that you're working on. Rather than being a static, you publish and it's done, you don't get to change it again type of document, Google Docs gives us an actual live look at what's going on with that document. So our documents are no longer completely static. You have a chance to change, revise. They're in a state of constant flux, and that can be pretty exciting. I'd like to share with you one of the sample papers I've done for my students, and it's right here. Notice I'm just clicking on my other tabs I happen to have open. And what I've done is actually typed a MLA formatted sample essay for my students. A few of the things that I really like to draw my students' attention to have been marked with comment features. So when we create the header, we actually go to Insert, Header, and that gives us access right up here to the top of the page. If there are multiple pages, we want to be sure that we don't just type the number 1 or our page number. You want to insert the page number, and that's going to give you the opportunity to make sure it doesn't say page number 1 on page number 2. That is a very common mistake that my students will make without proper guidance. So I have made some comments here to remind them to insert a header with their last name and to use the page number tool. Again, the document needs to have first and last name. I like to have class identification information, instructor name, and then we usually like to put the due date there. Titles need to be centered. I encourage my students to try to come up with creative titles. When we start our document, we are starting with an introduction paragraph, trying to grab our reader's attention, even if their audience is poor Mrs. Bassett reading hundreds of essays, but I do like it to be interesting. And again, I am commenting on or highlighting these portions that I want them to be aware of, the sample thesis statement, and then how to use proper in-text citation. Just little hints like that really help my students. What I've done on this particular document is I've shared it. Anyone with the link can view this document, and I've put this on my website as well, so my students can see it, and it really does give them an extra example of what a paper should look like. The next segment that I would like to share with you is the tool of using Google Docs and using it for student papers, being able to make comments on these papers and to give them some real feedback that they can use. Again, moving towards a more paperless classroom, but again, preparing our students for the future. So I have a sample paper here of a student in English 2, and we have a paper, looks pretty pretty good, but I need to make some comments on it. So what I'm going to do is show you my little trick for making comments on these papers rather than typing the same comment over and over and over again. What I've done is I actually have some common essay comments that I run across and that I use frequently, and those are pretty basic. Does it have a creative title? Did you remember MLA heading and format? And then if they need a good hook or to grab our reader's attention, there's a little video link that they can use. These are common responses that I'm having to give to my students. As you can see, there are quite a few of them. So what I've done is try to make this a little easier for myself, and when I'm working on a student's paper, I use a Google extension called it's a snip tool. It splits at the tab that I'm working on, and it really does make things a little easier for me. So I just use that little snip button, and it will separate these two tabs. So I have on one side of my screen the paper that I've been reviewing, and on the other side of the screen I have my common essay comments. So here I can see, first of all, my student did forget a title. So what I would do is I would simply go ahead and mark on there, oh, forgot your title. And I can look, I had some previous comments on there, and so I can highlight that little section that the title needs to be located and click there on that add a comment. It just pops open my little window there, and I can grab a good comment from my other document and just type that in, or sometimes it's just simpler just to type that in, a creative title, and that is missing. And I can just mark that comment. The student, whenever they check their email or when they open the document, they'll see my comments there, and they can make the determination to correct it or to resolve the comment. And really depending on each teacher, their decision could be to just mark the grade as is. You can do a rough draft and then a revision grade. Those kind of things really do help kids out. So I've got my information here. Again, as I continue to read through their paper, we may notice a few other little incidences of, oh, we have to remember to italicize. Letting them know what's going on there. It is a title of a longer work, a novel, and so that does need to be italicized. Letting students know. Here's a really common problem that we've discussed, but I'm seeing those first-person pronouns. So we need to remind them of these kind of pieces, and I can just kind of copy that. When I come over here and mark my comment, I can copy all of that information in there to remind them about that, and they can go through and watch the video as needed. They can check the information. Oh yeah, they remember what they're supposed to do, just sometimes there are some needed reminders. So that's one tool that I use with Google Docs. This tool is really helpful. Rather than have students give me stacks and stacks and stacks of papers, I can use Google Docs to make my life just a little bit easier and to give them the information and the feedback that they really deserve. Classroom and you are needing to give students feedback, there are lots of opportunities to do that, and one of my favorite new tools is called the Google Forms. It has been updated recently, and that is really exciting, but if you will go to New and then over to More, Google Forms, I can show you a couple of tricks with Google Forms that make things so much easier. Students can fill out responses online, and you can really get some great feedback tools there. Whenever you're creating your form, again, it gives you the basic interface. So I've got my basic untitled form, and I can just label that. This can be test 1. And then when we're creating our questions, we have lots of different options here. Our question styles can be short answers, paragraphs, multiple choice, using those radio buttons, checkboxes, drop downs, so many great responses that students can make. You can even embed images or short video clips, all kinds of great things in your form. What I like to do first is whenever I'm creating a form, I need to have a basic understanding of what I want. When students are filling out this information, I need to have their demographics as well. I need to know who they are. I need to know what hour they're in, and it makes my life a lot easier when I'm trying to disseminate this information, trying to break that down and either put it in my grade book or review it with students. So here's a sample of one of my tests that I've done using Google Forms. We have this great feature here. We can change the themes for our tests, which, you know, visually can be distracting for some students, but most of my students, I find that they really enjoy having that interface, so they can choose and see what it looks like. You've got lots of great options, but for this particular one, it was a lyric study where we're working on examining song lyrics and elements of poetry. I use the turntables, just kind of fun. But what I've done is I've set up different sections, but I begin my assessment with that basic information, their first name and their last name. Now, I don't put those things together because I do like to organize my data. I do sort according to the hour that they're in, and then of course last name organization just works better for my interface. So you don't have to do it that way, but that does help me a lot to have first name separate than last name. And then of course for their hours, I use a drop down box. And when you set up the drop downs, you offer all the different examples there, and you can add those different options if you have more class periods, and that will give you that extra option. And then to see what this looks like, we can just do a quick little preview to see what it looks from a student's point of view. It shows them what options are required, and it's just one piece at a time. I have it set up where they can see their progress bar as well. So back to the teacher view or the creator view, and I have this information. One of the best things that I found to include on gathering student information is their school email address. If I include that, I can actually respond to them and give them a copy of their results, which is really, really helpful. Students like to know, you know, how they did, and as long as I have their email response, I can give them individual feedback. Pretty helpful. Here I did set some parameters on this short answer because I did need it to be an email address in order for the program to work correctly. You can change your parameters to be sure it is text that is an email address, and they get a little warning note if they try to put something that is not their email address. It just reminds them of how to do that. For our students, the instructions are there. Then on down, we have the first part of our test, and I have it broken into sections. You can title those sections if you'd like to, but you don't always have to. My test is designed to be multiple choice, and I have the components broken down there. What I did actually is I typed it in Microsoft or my Google Docs first and just copied and pasted those responses over. It did make it a little easier for me, but that's not something that you have to do. The questions are in small chunks, so we can go back and analyze them later on. When students take this test, I really enjoy this option because after we've taken this test, and maybe before I even respond to them with their grades, I like to kind of analyze their responses. Ignore this part where you see names. I'm going to go down a little bit, and we're going to look at some of these things. I can look at each question, and it helps me understand what my students think the right answer is, if they are correct or if they're not. When we have those questions that the colors are so similar, that means there was some confusion there. It may have been a poorly written question, or it could have been something that students did not quite understand. It may be something that we need to review. Whenever I have something like that, and It's great for EOC review. And several students were essentially fooled by the distractors. What I like to do is open it up for discussion. Those who got it right, why did you get it right? Those of you who got it wrong, explain to us what tricked you. I love opening that dialogue up for students, and it really gives them a chance to show what they know and to really process what was this test doing, trying to trick me. So this data, this information is really, really helpful. Another one of the wonderful things that I wanted to show you in the Google Forms and the responses analysis is this section right here. It will let you view your responses in sheets, and that's where I like to go and really examine and look at their grades. When I'm looking at the responses in sheets, there's a whole nother add-on that I can use that I have found absolutely fascinating. It's really helped me. I would honestly say it's probably added a few years to my life because it essentially grades all of these things for you. The add-on I'm speaking of is called Flubaroo, and it's a strange name, but this was developed and it absolutely amazed me when it comes to just instantly grading all of these assignments and giving me excellent feedback. So I do recommend, I'll give you the link for how to look at the videos on using Flubaroo, but it is an add-on that you can get when you click Get Add-ons and you search. The magic word is Flubaroo. So yes, you do want to find it, and it will be definitely worth your time to advocate for this. It is fantastic. It will, seriously, add years to your life. Let me show you how I did that and what it did for me. So once I have enabled Flubaroo on my document, I could actually grade the assignment using Flubaroo. It takes just a couple of minutes to do that, and it creates a whole nother tab down here, or a whole nother sheet in Google Sheets, and it does all this wonderful analysis for me. I did hide my students' names so you wouldn't see all of that stuff. I didn't want to embarrass anyone, but the great thing here is when I look at these assignments, I can go back and see during a particular class period those things that are indicated in red. That student really struggled on that assessment, and they had what I would consider less than proficient. So that is a student that may need a chance to retake the assignment. We may need to discuss what's going on the assignment to make sure the student understands the concepts that were covered. Another great feature of Flubaroo is it will indicate the questions that my group as a whole scored really poorly in. So I can see those questions that my students struggled with, and it will give me insight on what I maybe need to cover with them again. So it is very, very interesting. This document is a little overwhelming, and when you consider how many students that you're working with, it can get a little scary when you're trying to figure out what's going on. But Flubaroo is a wonderful tool. A test that would have taken me at least 2 hours to grade the old-fashioned way can be graded in seconds with Flubaroo. Definitely a tool that I recommend you review and make use of if at all possible. So maybe you're a teacher like me that realizes that internet use is fantastic and we love all these great online tools, but the reality is in our classrooms that sometimes the Wi-Fi doesn't connect like it needs to, or you don't have enough devices for every student in your classroom. What I've realized is there are some great tools that will give the teacher access to some online resources, but the students don't necessarily have to have everything online. It is wonderful to use your classroom space, have them doing those presentations, but what you can do to make your classroom a little bit more streamlined or to just give yourself a break is you can use the online tools. We've been using rubrics for a long time, and what we've done with this particular project is I've taken a great project where my students are up and they are presenting on what they've learned, and I've taken that rubric and I've put it into an online form. Now, this is not a form like I showed you before. This is a form that I am filling out as my students are presenting, and this form can be instantly emailed then to my students with the MailMerge app add-on. So this is a form that I created for presentations. It is a teacher feedback form, student presentations. I will need the student's email address if they want their responses, and so I can ask that my students either put that in their presentation, or I actually have it on a separate roster that I had my students do earlier in the year. So I have my student's email address, and I would simply, now this is where I was building the form. So again, the builder view, I have developed the form to have the student's email address, last name and first name, and then of course for organizational purposes, I definitely need their class period. And then what I did is I actually screenshotted, I don't think that's a real word. Okay, so I took a screenshot of their rubric and I'm chunking that and putting it into this form. So presentation skills are really important in this particular project. So I've got what it takes to be advanced, and then the score that is below basic. So again, a lot like any kind of other assessment, but this is a presentation assessment. So what I did is I set up a multiple choice grid, and that has the rows eye contact, vocal inflection, again, advanced, proficient, basic, and below basic. Here is my guide, and I did that for 3 separate categories. The first is presentation, second is content knowledge. They do need to demonstrate full knowledge, giving me plenty of explanation and elaboration, and that is here. And then I took it down even for their visual support, the poster that goes along with this project. I need to see 5 or more facts, I need to see illustrations, and this is where you break out the crayons. We're not totally high tech, but the teacher can be high tech and kids can get instant feedback, but still meeting all those kinesthetic needs for the students. So this is what the builder view looks like, and whenever I am watching presentations, this is my view for whenever I'm trying to give them their feedback. So as a student is doing the work, I have the student's email address in there. I'm using mine just to make it a little easier. And then what I can do is I put the student's name. So the student, his name was going to go in here, select their class period using that really handy drop-down menu. And then I've got the presentation. You can use this or access it on an iPad if you have one of those, your Chromebook, laptop, whatever you happen to be using, but this is a form that's very easy to use. Using that multiple choice grid, I can make my selections. The student has a tendency to avoid eye contact with her audience, or his audience, and I can just indicate that there. Maybe they were a little too monotone, really need to push them a little bit harder in that area, and so you would just mark that. And then, but if they're right on task, boy, they know their stuff. You support them there with the feedback. It's kind of interesting. So once you've done that and you've graded their assignment, you would just click submit, and that goes into the responses. As students are doing their presentation, you would just go through and submit another response. Okay. Then when you're ready to really look at these responses, I'm going to show you this really great tool there. Here are some practices that I've done with students. Gives me that information. Oh, I had a pretty good break of where I was putting these things. And you can start to track this data for your class periods and find out where do we need to have those conversations, where are our weak areas. And then one of the wonderful tools that you can use when you go into your Sheets version, that's where you can add that MailMerge tool. This is another add-on that you can find in the add-on menu. I go to add-ons, then Form Mule. That's the one that I found that really works great for me. If you don't have that or it's not been set up, you need to just go straight to your add-ons. There's one of my favorite tools right there, Flubaroo, and you can just search for a MailMerge. Like I said, the one that I found that I really enjoy is the Form Mule Email Merge Utility. I've got that already installed, you can see. And what happens when I do that, I go here to my add-ons, my Form Mule, and I can set this up where it will instantly email it to the student once I submit the response. We have our form triggers here. I only have one response set up. I'll show you what my template looks like, and you can create your own. You could have multiple templates if you have a student who is maybe scoring really low. You want to have the feedback form for them, giving them times for tutoring. Maybe those really high scores need an extra amount of praise. So you might structure them that way. Mine right now is just a very basic teacher feedback form, and I have it set up just as teacher feedback, and I'll show you how that template looks when I have it structured. Essentially, I am plugging in this information like the old-fashioned access or mail merge that we had done in the past. Google Sheets will help us do that. So it sends it to the student's email address. I could carbon copy myself or my administrator. Of course, they probably don't want all those emails, but I could put that information there. I do put my email address as a reply to because I do encourage students to ask questions and respond back. I have to include a subject line, and so that's simply presentation project, your teacher feedback. I typed in the term greetings, and then I just drag over that first name, and that gives them that information there. Okay, so greetings, and then it will have their name. Here is a copy of your grade for the presentation project, and then what I've done is just dropped over these form responses. My basic reply, if you have questions or concerns, I give them that information, let them know the exam is coming up, and just a hint of what they should work on next. So this is really helpful. When we set up our tags, that will send it out immediately. So it shows us what this email is going to look like. Here's a copy of your grade for the presentation project. That was one of my first students that I had evaluated. And so there's their first name. Didn't give you their last name, just their first name. Lets you know what their presentation skill evaluation was, how they did on each of those elements. And here's the next student. And then it's really kind of exciting, but I can just send those emails out as they go. Very exciting, huh? So this is a great tool, makes life just a little bit easier. It does really give teachers a chance to give authentic feedback, and students have that individualized feedback that they can use to really grow and develop. Great tool. I hope you'll try it out. Teachers are using their computers all the time, and they're using some great things there, but I want to show you something else that teachers can use, especially in those areas where we want to be using technology, but the technology doesn't always want to work for us. So with my smartphone, I have a mobile app that I love. It likens back to the old Scantron technology that we used years ago when I was in middle school, and I remember those bubble sheets, and that's kind of not very exciting to think about. But the great thing about those Scantrons and that instant feedback was that teachers were able to get a good measurement of what we knew and what we didn't know individually. And so now when I look at that Scantron, it's a little different, but I have a really exciting app that I'd like to show you that is really one of my absolute favorite new things. So here in my smartphone, I go to the app and it's called ZipGrade. ZipGrade is free for like the first 100 scans, and then it is a small fee after that. I was willing to pay the small fee. I probably would have paid 10 times the small fee. I think it was like $6 a year. I, out of my own pocket, probably would have paid 60 because it's such a great tool. So you can see here I have a number of different tests that I've experimented with and used. Well, I want to show you what to do when we're creating a new quiz. So I'm going to click New Quiz, and this is going to be, we're just going to say Quiz 10, and I have a sample answer sheet that I was able to download from their website with the appropriate labels and things on it. So I want to show you kind of what that is. I've got my 20 question form, and I'm going to say this was part of my English 1 class, but they also did this in the other hour, so I can set that up, and I can just click Create Quiz. I've got some options here, and the first one I'm going to use is my edit key. It takes me here to where I can type in my key, but here's what I really like to do. I like to scan for the key. And what it does is it opens up my cell phone camera, and I can just scan that key. Let me redo that one, see if I can make it just a little bit clearer. And then if I like it, I can save it. Now, each question can be worth more than 1 point. We can give points for an effort, but I just go with the basic 1 point per question, and I continue through that way. Then I have my key established. We can do more than one key if you want to have a test that has multiple versions. And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to start scanning my students' papers. Again, just like an old Scantron, I give the students a bubble sheet and I give them the test. Please don't mark on the test, just use your answer sheet. Those kind of basic features. But when I'm ready to grade, this is what's going to blow your mind. When I'm ready to grade, I just click the scan paper and oh, here's Mike's paper. It's graded that fast. Okay? Mike kind of struggled on that. Looks like he only got a 13 out of 20, a 65%. But let's go ahead and keep scanning. I can go back, and here's my next student. My next student did pretty well. This was Joe, and look at that, a 90%. I have it set where it actually waits for me to click, because the first couple times I was using this, it was scanning so fast, I couldn't even turn the pages fast enough. If you notice, I've already gone through a couple more pages. I'm continuing to scan. I've got Paul's page now, and then I can go back and, oh, there's another one. And I did a sample for you, so I don't have a full stack of 100 papers, but you don't want to see me scan that many. But let me tell you, I can grade 100 papers using this app faster than anything that you would imagine. So it's pretty exciting. So I can go ahead and go back, and I've got that information here on my mobile phone. I was able to scan instantly. If a student wants feedback right then, I can tell them, let me look at your paper, beep, oh, here's your grade. They get instant feedback. The kind of fun thing too, I can go back and review their papers. I can see instantly here what I have, and that's really interesting. I can go back and do an item analysis. Which of these questions did my students struggle with? I can look and I click on that question number 1, and it shows me that 80% of my students got that one correct. The main answer was the correct answer, and that was B. And then I do see a few students answered C. I can click on the answer B and see which students got that question right. I can click on the C and see which one of my students struggled with that one. It is so interesting to go back and look at those particular questions. So here, same kind of thing. I can see who got it right, who got it wrong. If I am concerned about a question, I had most of my students miss this question. This might be one that we need to review. 3 of my students missed it. 2 got it correct. That is a really great tool. I can see what's going on with my students. I can really explain who got it, who didn't get it. This is a wonderful tool. Administrators trying to look and see, how do we break down this data? How do we understand what students know and what they don't know? ZipGrade is a fantastic tool for me because I can really get in there and understand what's going on. If you're using quarterfinals or common assessments, this is a wonderful, wonderful way to break down those papers and break down that information. ZipGrade, definitely worth it.